I think he could have easily have played for someone like, Real Madrid, Barcelona, AC Milan, Man United. He could have easily have played for any of those teams. That's how good he was. And he was so good, even though he missed so many games, he still got picked for Champions League finals because he was so good, even though there was injury doubts over him. But they believed that he was such a good player that they still picked him, even though that was the case. Obviously, he had a difficult period throughout his career, personal issues, and it's kind of always one of those, what could have been? What levels could he have gone to had he had not those off-field problems?
Hello, I'm Jeff Stelling, and this is Football's Greatest. Each week, I'll be sitting down with a legend to discuss and debate some of the best exponents of the beautiful game. The players that got you off your seat, the hard men that made you wince, and the moments that will stay with you for life. In this episode, we're going to discuss the top 5 Australian players, and who better to do that with than the former Australian goalkeeper, Mark Schwarzer. Mark, nice to have you along.
No, thanks for having me.
There have been some great imports into the game, not just in this country, but into Europe as well. So you've got plenty of choice, and I think people are going to enjoy some of the names you're going to come up with today. So you've got 4 outfield players and 1 goalkeeper. Let's start with the outfield players. Who's your first one?
Mark Viduka. Actually, I was having this conversation with my son just the other day, saying that I actually don't think he really fulfilled his potential because he never played for a massive club. He had a chance. There was one time when he was at Leeds United, Champions League football, and I think Roma tried to buy him, and it, for whatever reason, didn't happen.
A lot of Leeds fans are going to be going crazy now. What
I
do you
know.
mean he didn't play for a massive club?
Yeah, but when I talk, when I talk about massive club, I mean one of the big hitters in Europe. When you talk about Juve, Inter Milan, AC Milan, whether it was a Man United at the time, Arsenal, Bayern Munich, or whatever it is, one of the truly massive big European hitters, Real Madrid, Barcelona, whatever. And because I think Viduka was good enough to. I think he could have easily have played for someone like, Real Madrid, Barcelona, AC Milan, Man United. He could have easily have played for any of those teams. That's how good he was.
Yeah.
He was a player that he had everything. He could be a target man. He could run in behind. He rolled people. Fantastic skill for a big man, and his eye for goal was incredible.
Do you think he was underrated, and maybe in part because he had this reputation, possibly due to his style of play, as being lazy?
Dukes was a little bit lazy. Duke's approach in general was a little bit lazy. And I say that with the utmost respect because I love Dukes, and as a player...
He's in Croatia, he won't be listening.
Yeah, I hope not. Sorry, Dukes, if you are. When I really sit down and think about it and watch him and played against him, played with him, national team, played with him at Middlesbrough, he wasn't someone that stayed behind every day. He wasn't someone that looked after his weight, his diet. He wasn't someone that tried to get every bit of ounce out of him. A lot of it was natural ability. Of course, he did work on stuff, but not to the level where the top players do, or players with lesser ability do, to get anywhere near his level. They absolutely work their socks off every day. Dukes didn't do that because he had an element of natural ability, but also he was just so good.
As Liverpool found out, didn't they? He scored all 4 goals for Leeds against Liverpool.
He did, yeah.
What a phenomenal
It was opening day of the season, I think, that
Yeah.
season as well. Yeah, I mean, yeah, Middlesbrough as well. He was phenomenal for Middlesbrough. Big part of us getting to, a UEFA Cup final. He was massive. We had him, Jimmy Floyd Hasselbank up front, Yakubu, and Dukes was always one of the first names on the sheet because that's how good a player he was. And with the national team, he was really big for us at the World Cup in 2006. Didn't score, but his link-up play. That's probably 2006 World Cup. The lead up to that was probably the hardest I've seen Dukes work. That was probably the hardest I saw him prepare for a World Cup. He worked his socks off. He was as fit as I've ever seen him. And that's probably because the manager also demanded him so much from him.
Yeah. Was he a good team man? And I asked that because James Milner told us that when he was a 16-year-old starting out at Leeds, Mark Viduka was the one who put his arm around him and became a sort of mentor to him, if you like.
He had a heart of gold. He's a big lump. He's a he's actually a very sensitive guy. He's got a very thick exterior. He takes a lot, but then when you get him angry, that Croatian mist comes down, that red mist, and you don't want to be around when that happens because I've seen him and he's pretty angry. But no, he's definitely a very caring guy and a guy that is a quiet thinker. And every now and then just pops up with something and very witty and very quick. And he's always laughing at his own jokes. And not more often than not, still laughing before he even finishes the joke. But no, he's a good guy to have around and someone that more often than not also doesn't speak until he's got something worthwhile or meaningful to say.
Okay. My kids would tell you that's completely the opposite of me. So Mark Viduka's number one. Who's number two?
Harry Kewell. He probably one of the most, if not the talented player that we ever produced. I mean, this list, by the way, could have been 10, 12 players deep because there are a lot of players that don't even make this list but are equally right up there. But Harry Kewell, again, very young age, came over here as a young kid at Leeds United, was, I think, unplayable at times. Unfortunately for him, injuries hampered his career a lot. But that time at Leeds, I think we saw the very, very best of Harry Kewell at Leeds. We saw glimpses afterwards, but at Leeds United, he was at his peak, at his best, coming in off the left, striking balls, playing Champions League football, causing teams all sorts of trouble. And I just wish, and I'm sure he does as well, that he had a bit more luck when he went to Liverpool with injuries, because I think he could have absolutely tore it up there. And he was so good, even though he missed so many games, he still got picked for Champions League finals because he was so good, even though there was injury doubts over him. But they believed that he was such a good player that they still picked him, even though that was the case. And unfortunately, he broke down in the final and so forth. And I think it was another cup final afterwards. He did the same thing. But that was the respect he had and how good a player he was.
I mean, people will point the finger sometimes and say, well, he was inconsistent. But was he inconsistent because of the injuries, because his body was hurting?
Absolutely. Yeah, he was hurting pretty much for certainly the latter stages of his career for a lot of the time. He used to work. He it wasn't through lack of effort for him not playing. It wasn't through lack of being unprofessional. It was on the contrary. He was the other extreme. He was, if you talk about Dukes and about working on it, Harry was the other extreme. He worked on everything. He tried to address every issue on trying to stay fit, trying to do prevention work, trying to get employed physios and masseuse, and had his own. He was around the clock trying to stay fit, trying to work on himself. So he did everything he possibly could to be fit. And boy, when he was fit, he was huge. He was huge for Australia, and he was huge for Leeds United particularly.
So, I mean, such a wonderful footballer, such a talented player. He seems absolutely determined that he will become a coach or a manager, if you like, to such a degree that he went to Crawley and Oldham and Barnet, with no disrespect to those clubs. My team is right down there with them. But slightly surprising sometimes to see a player who had so much quality willing to go to such a relatively low level to forge a career in management.
I think he probably, in hindsight, if he'd waited a bit longer and waited till Ange came first, and then come afterwards, then maybe a few more doors would open up a lot. So,
because he's worked with Ange at Celtic.
Yeah, so I think if you kind of would be able to replay it all, and him maybe, I don't know, I haven't spoken to him about it, but I would think that maybe him being able to do what he's doing, being an assistant to Ange, had he been able to do that right at the beginning and had a couple of years under his belt working with Ange, then going out, I think he would have found himself in a far better place. I mean, I think he did really well at Crawley, and then the opportunity to go to Notts County came up for him. Big club. Wasn't what he'd expected or was promised. Didn't go to plan. And it's funny because Harry's one of those people that I never thought, and I said this to him when he was at Crawley Town. I interviewed him, and I said to him, "Look, mate, where is Harry Kewell? Are you Harry Kewell? Because You being a manager, I thought you were one of the last people to be a manager.
Why?
I don't know. As a player, he was so focused on him. Nothing else mattered. And I think because he was so focused on being fit, getting fit, staying fit, working on his game, nothing else mattered to him. And to be perfectly honest with you, I never really had those conversations with him. He was quite closed. You'd have superficial conversations with him, and I've had more in-depth conversations post-football than I did ever as a teammate of his. So that's probably why.
Yeah. Do you Aussies abroad all stay in touch then? Or?
Not really. No, it's funny, like I think in football in general, like there's not many people you kind of stay in touch with. It's people that you either stay in touch with people you grew up with at a very young age and played football all the way through your career, and maybe you were lucky enough to go to the same level and make careers out of it. And then those ones you grew up with are the people, certainly for me, are the ones that I have the most contact with and relationship with, not people that I played throughout my career.
Now, thanks for watching Football's Greatest on YouTube. But can I ask you please to hit that subscribe button? That way you won't miss any of our future episodes, and we have some great guests coming up on the show. Okay, so look, this is a pretty good start, isn't it? Mark Viduka and Harry Kewell. I'm going to ask you number 3. I think I know who it is, but off you go. You tell us.
Tim Cahill.
Yeah, it had to be Tim Cahill.
Yeah, because if you think about Timmy wasn't the most gifted player. He wasn't the most technical player. But he probably worked on his game more than anyone else. Certainly out of the group of players I mentioned so far, his desire to succeed, his work rate was exceptional, and he's working on things like heading the ball. I mean, he made a name for it.
Yeah. For someone who is not the tallest.
No, but his timing and his spring.
His leap was amazing.
Yeah, huge. And it became his trademark, and still is to this day. People talk about, heading the ball. And I know Sam Kerr, for example, based her whole kind of approach to learning and watching and observing Tim Cahill and how he approached balls and how he headed balls. And learn, and you watch Sam Kerr play. There's a uncanny resemblance of a Tim Cahill there in disguise almost. So Timmy's ability, his energy from box to box was right up there with the very best. Late runs into the box, scoring goals, scoring headers, huge as well, and was monumental for Australia as well.
Yeah. Well, I think 108 caps, wasn't it, just behind you? Yeah.
Yeah, I made sure that happened.
And he was, is it fair to say he had an edge? He could be really feisty.
Yeah, he was a fighter, but I wouldn't say in a bad way. He was more of a fighter just in terms of he was always fighting for everything, right? So I think he fought to have an opportunity. I think he fought to prove people wrong. I think, we all have been through it. I think every footballer you would sit down on a chair here would probably tell you the same thing, that everyone's had different levels of fighting for things.
When you play for Millwall, that's what they expect to see.
Probably, yeah, I would say so. That's probably and Everton to a degree as well.
Yeah,
I think Everton was very much that as well. Working under David Moyes, there was a minimum expectation that you had to put a shift in. You had to put everything on that football pitch. You couldn't pull out of anything. You had to be fully committed all the time. And I think that continued throughout his whole career.
Brilliant. Now, number 4 on your list of outfield players, less familiar maybe to people in this country.
Yes. I don't think there's been many people probably in this country who know of him. Mark Bresciano. He played in Italy, Serie A. So the time that golden generation of players, we made the World Cup, and that was what the name was given, and we've been labelled with this name of golden generation of players. Mark Bresciano was very much one of those. So we had 8 players playing week in, week out in the Premier League. We had one in La Liga, John Aloisi. Mm-hmm. We had 2 playing in Serie A, and Mark Bresciano was one of them. And technically, a very, very gifted player. Could have played in the Premier League. Easily have played in the Premier League.
I think he almost did, didn't he?
He
Manchester City were going to sign him.
That's right. They would have done very well of signing him. He was an outstanding player. Technically outstanding. Give him the ball in any position. Could play his pass, play around anyone, get out of a tight situation. Work rate. Brilliant. Feistiness wasn't the biggest, but very feisty. Delivery, set plays. Delivery off a set play. right up there with the very, very best, and could score from anywhere. So again, and he was kind of understated a lot as well. He didn't come with the bells and whistles. He wasn't someone seeking attention. He was one of those classic footballers that let his football do the talking. Um, and he's quite a quiet, mild mannered guy.
And he scored the goal against Uruguay that took that World Cup playoff, if you like, replacing the World Cup finals, to a penalty shootout.
He did, yeah. No, he was a big part of the national team. Very much a part of that successful period of time. He you just knew you could always rely on him.
Yeah.
He was always there. He was always 100% committed. You knew that maybe if the game wasn't quite going well, he could pull something out of the bag. You knew he could put a delivery in the box. You could get on the end of something, late run into the box. You knew that he was always a threat.
Mm. Just remind us what happened in the penalty shootout.
We won. John Aloisi scored the winner.
And who made the saves at the other end? Two fantastic saves.
Yeah, I made a couple of saves.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was that moment changed football in Australia forever. That was our first World Cup in 32 years. So we qualified in 74 and we went through that whole period of time, 32 years without qualifying for another World Cup. We got so close so many times. And that was the moment, 2005, qualifying for that World Cup changed the landscape of football in Australia forever.
What was the nation's attitude to you after that? You must have been a national hero.
Yeah, there was a lot of us. Yeah, I mean, look, of course you get more of the limelight because you play your part, you save 2 penalties, and you play a big part in the game. I almost got subbed off leading up to the penalty shootout. Gus Hiddink was going to substitute me. Thankfully, Brett Emerton, who I'm indebted to, pulled up with cramps and had to come off. The landscape changed completely. We became kind of household names within Australia, and I think we inspired a lot of generation of players to want to go and become football players. I think football really was put on a map, and the financial rewards, the attention, the respect that the code received went to a different level altogether. And I think the success that we've had continuously qualifying for subsequent World Cups, so we've qualified for every single World Cup since then in 2006, was all part of that foundations being laid. And it allowed the league, the federation, to be sustainable, to become more professional. And we became a very big attraction point, certainly to sponsorship and revenue generated.
I do hope you're enjoying the show. I just want to tell you that you can follow us at Football's Greatest Pod on Instagram, TikTok and Facebook. And search for Football's Greatest Pod to find us on X. We're going to move on to the goalkeeper in a moment, but, for a number of years, there have been Australians who graced the top division. I mean, going back to the earlier ones that I remember, people like Craig Johnston, Liverpool Stan Lazaridis came over, didn't he? Lucas Neal was
Brett Emerton.
Was really successful. Brett Emerton, Blackburn.
John Filan was a goalkeeper, played at Blackburn Rovers as well. Jason Keaton was at Everton for a long, long time behind Neville Southall. So the list goes on. Kevin Muscat, Craig Moore played at Glasgow Rangers at Crystal Palace, Midday Yerdenek. There's a long list. Scott McDonald played at Southampton as a kid, ended up at Celtic, had a really good career at Celtic. The list is a long one, and I've missed lots of players there as well because there are so many of them that have done really, really well.
Yeah, I'm going to mention Joel Porter, who graced Hartlepool for, 4 or 5 seasons, was Player of the Year on one occasion for us, and actually he came back in 2005 for a reunion, and oh my goodness, the welcome he got was he made his mark. And talking of marks, your goalkeeper that you've included in this 5.
Yeah, I've got to include Mark Bosnich. For me, he was inspirational. He was someone that, he was the one that lit the torch really for certainly goalkeepers being respected, accepted, sought after in England, in the English game. Certainly, I think opened a lot of people's eyes that potentially in Australia there may be more goalkeepers coming along, maybe more opportunities to bring people over and give them a chance. And Bozza was an unbelievable goalkeeper. His biggest weakness probably was the ball at his feet, and that was probably one of the things that he found difficult to deal with. But on the line, reflexes, spring, yeah, right up there. I mean, I was, I've been in national team camps with him. I've been in under-20s national teams with him, trained with him, worked with him. Used to, at 20 years old, he used to, just like chew his ear off, ask him everything about England, ask him everything about his career in Europe, what it's like, what he does, how he trains, how he lives, what it took him, what he went through, what coaching sessions were like, what he did at training, everything. I probably was a pain in the backside to him. But I have the utmost respect for him. He obviously had a difficult period throughout his career, personal issues, and it's kind of almost one of those, what could have been, what levels could he have gone to had he had not those off-field problems. But yeah, huge admiration for him, a lot of respect for him. And also, he was an outstanding goalkeeper.
I was going to ask you about the relationship between the two of you because you obviously were rivals, but it
Yep.
sounded like you got on brilliantly.
We were rivals to a degree, but never really on the same level, because when he was the clear number one for Australia when I first came to England, and I was just sort of kind of starting off, and I just moved to Middlesbrough, and I hadn't hardly played a game. So, Boz had established himself, played lots of Premier League games and English First Division games, and it was kind of like I had a long way to go to even think about trying to compete against him. So I was always of the opinion, like, Boz is the number one. I just need to learn as much as I can, take whatever I can from him. I just want to be a sponge. I want to work on my game. I want to improve as much as I possibly can. Then maybe one day I can challenge him. And then obviously he kind of had his off-field issues and sort of fell by the wayside a little bit in terms of being out of football for a number of years. And that opened the door for me then. And that kind of coincided with the point of where I started to play more frequently and started playing well. And we had a change in manager for the national team. And I was asked to, if I wanted to play in the national team, because there was a period of time where I wasn't involved for a while. And it sort of coincided with that period of time. And then when Bozza started to come back a game, he kind of never quite got back to the heights of what he had beforehand. So we never really ended up certainly being what I would say on an equal playing field.
Mm-hmm. I mean, obviously 7 brilliant years at Aston Villa. Then he's gone to Manchester United. Was that just a case of bad timing, if you like?
Yeah, it was very, very big shoes to fill in trying to fill Peter Schmeichel's shoes. I don't really know what went on. I've never really discussed it with him. And, it just seemed to be from afar that there were off-field issues. I mean, in terms of possibly with him and Sir Alex Ferguson, maybe didn't see eye to eye. I'm not really sure. I remember playing against him on a number of occasions, played really well, saved a penalty against us at Old Trafford. We lost the game 1-0 in the end because he played so well. We should have probably drawn the game at the very least. And he had an up and down time. I think he had periods of time where he played really, really well. And then obviously it ended pretty quickly and ended up going to Chelsea. So it was a tough time for him, definitely. And I don't know whether he was up against it from the minute he walked in the door. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, Sir Alex Ferguson, in his book, described him as a terrible professional, to which Bozzy responded, "I'm honoured just to be mentioned," which was a brilliant reply.
I think with Bozza, I think he's pretty comfortable with being very honest with how things happen and unfolded, and I think it's difficult for him to disagree. I think he had such a turbulent lifestyle going on, things going on, and he had other issues. I can't even imagine what he was going through.
Yeah. Look, I mean, obviously, not quite so many Australians are around at the moment. We had Matt Ryan playing for Brighton until relatively recently. Is potentially Harry Souttar the next big Australian hope in the Premier League?
Well,
I know he's in the Championship now.
Yeah, he was. He got his move to Leicester, and I just thought that was a really good move for him. I think the change in manager has harmed him. In terms of his chances of playing all the time. I think he's an outstanding player. I think he may have to go elsewhere to get a chance to prove himself again. Leicester's a wonderful club, but it just doesn't seem like he's going to have much of an opportunity there at Leicester.
Are there any others who are liable to make a breakthrough, Mark?
Ryan McGree's a really good player. I like him at Middlesbrough. I think he's done really well there. He's someone I think could make that step up, whether it's at Middlesbrough or whether it's elsewhere. I think he's done really, really well. Silvera at Middlesbrough as well. He's only just signed in the summer. He's done really well. He's had a lot more game time than probably maybe even he thought he may have got to begin with. He scored goals as well. Very much involved with the national team. So excited to see where he goes there because I think he's really good. Kyle Rolls, who's at Hearts, really good centre half. Had a really good World Cup, and I think these are guys that, given an opportunity somewhere, given an opportunity to play at a higher level, I don't think would let people down. I think would do really well and possibly would grow even more. And that's always the challenge, right? So getting that opportunity to play, someone believing them, someone giving them that opportunity to play at that level. But I'm hopeful we'll get a few players coming through soon.
Well, I tell you what, some of the names we've talked about, Cahill, Viduka, Kewell, Bosnich, Schwarzer. We look forward to the next Australian invasion.
Let's hope it happens sooner rather than later.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Mark, thanks so much for joining us. And don't forget to listen to our chat on the game's greatest goalkeepers. Next time on Football's Greatest.
Verbals, physical challenges, goals he scored, someone that wanted to make it uncomfortable for me. So when I was in possession, would enjoy that side of it as much as scoring. Just everything. You never come off the pitch against Wayne not tired.
If you're watching on YouTube, just a reminder, please hit the subscribe button so you don't miss an episode of Football's Greatest. And if you're listening to us on your favourite podcast platform, please press follow so you get us in your feed every week. This has been Football's Greatest. Football's Greatest is a Folding Pocket production with BBC Studios.